My friends laughed when I said I bought a cabin in Alaska, but a year later when they saw who moved in beside me, they finally stopped laughing and started wondering what I knew first. My name's Jake, 31. At my going-away drinks, friends and family half listened while I said I'd bought a cheap cabin near Talkeetna, Alaska, for snow and silence. Mom scrolled. My stepdad watched baseball. My sister Katie fed her baby. Cool, good luck. And that was it. In the group chat, they dropped a meme about me becoming a hermit with Lapland syndrome. At work, Brian threw a farewell slideshow on the projector. A photoshopped me with a waist-length beard and the caption room in igloo. Utilities included. Laughs, whistles. So when are you back? I sent my family the address, dates, even a photo of the purchase contract, crickets. The night before I left, I swung by for a goodbye. Mom added milk to her list and told me drink water. I pulled out at 5:40 a.m. in an old pickup onto the Whittier Ferry with a podcast playlist and a feeling. If I vanished, they'd notice only when it inconvenienced them. First week, I posted snow, furs, the wood stove, no likes from my people. The cabin is mile marker 11 off a plowed spur. Spruce crowding the drive like bouncers. One room, loft, oil drum stove. A Honda U2200i I bought used for $650 cash. And a hand pump that wheezes judgment with every stroke. The seller left a note on graph paper. Stove likes dry birch. Don't trust the back step. He also left a jar of screws and a bent putty knife. Practical inheritance. I work remote CAD drafts for a small fabrication shop in the lower 48, and I'm used to being the middle kid in every conversation. Nodding, adding context, getting talked over. Out here, the only interruptions are ravens and the generator sputtering when it's below zero. I inventory like a quartermaster. Chain bar oil, stove gaskets, 5 gallons of kerosene, 2 of gas, 3 boxes of Strike Anywhere matches. I label plastic totes with painter's tape. I put my Garmin InReach Mini on a lanyard and clip it to a nail by the door. I set a 2 a.m. alarm the first night to check the fire. The silence is loud the way a stadium is loud. Total presence. On day 3, Mom finally calls. A cabin? You're kidding, right? She laughs, which is our family's way of saying stop. I say, deed recorded Friday. Matanuska-Susitna Borough. Parcel ends at the creek. She says, when are you coming home? I say, I am home. She sighs like I left my plate in the sink again. Stepdad grabs the phone. You'll freeze your tail off. Come back before Christmas. I give him the temperature, -6, feels like -14 the way I give him tire pressures. He says, don't be dramatic. The chorus mobilizes. Katie texts, proud of you. Also, can you Venmo $120? Formula shortage. Brian tags me in a story. Our boy discovered flannel. Aunt Linda asks if I'm finding myself, then sends a link to a meditation retreat in Sedona. I screenshot the deed, my name clean on the line, the legal description like a spell, and drop it in the chat with a thumbs up. Silence. Then a single heart reaction from a cousin whose name I barely remember. Decision flip. I stop asking to be seen. I act. I file a change of address, set up a P.O. box, swap the cabin's electric account into my name even though it's just for the heat tape, and schedule the oil delivery with a $300 deposit. I email my landlord in Anchorage and end the apartment lease early under the sublet clause. My coworker Nolan takes it sight unseen and sends me $850 for the deposit transfer. I sign up for a chainsaw safety course in Wasilla, $95 Saturday, and buy a Husqvarna 450 Rancher off Marketplace for $280 after checking the compression with a borrowed gauge. The guy throws in a box of dull files. I spend a night learning to sharpen. When the family suggests I rent the cabin for extra cash, I write a single sentence. It's not an investment. It's a boundary. I start a ledger with columns. Fuel, food, fixes, friction. Under friction I list Mom's laugh, Brian's slideshow, Katie's Venmo. Seeing them on paper shrinks them. Snow stacks on the railing like folded towels. I hang a cast iron skillet on a nail and learn its mood. The backstep is a liar. I replace it with a 2x8 I rip with a borrowed circular saw at 7:12 p.m., headlamp haloing my breath. I set 2 trail cams at the drive, not for bears, for peace of mind. I write the coordinates of the property corners in pencil on the inside cover of a Write in the Rain notebook. I boil water in a dented Stanley and drink it plain. At 11:03 p.m., Brian texts a video of the bar chanting my name. "Come back for New Year's," he says. I look at the firebox, the orange under the ash, the silhouette of my own hand on the log tongs. I type, "Maybe." Then I put the phone face down and split 3 more rounds, because tomorrow's high is forecast at -2, and the stove likes to be fed on the hour. The cabin is still 1 room, still the oil drum stove, still the orange cord to the Honda U2200 I humming like a tame bee behind the shed. Signal if I climb the ridge and point my phone at the 1 square of sky that likes me. I run Ethernet from a Starlink dish I bolted to a 2x6 mast at 7:40 a.m. -9 degrees Fahrenheit, fingers in nitrile under wool. I pay the $120 a month without blinking because silence is priceless. I learn the angle of the sun on the south window and the sound the stovepipe makes when wind shifts east. I track groceries on a yellow pad. Coffee 14.99, rice 9.49, eggs 6.29. The ledger calms me. Work is a remote dev gig for a local outfit that builds simple dispatch tools for snowplow crews. They pay $48 per hour as a contractor. I file a new EIN and set aside 30% for taxes in a high-yield account with a nickname, Furnace and Future. I buy a Kill A Watt for $22 to measure draw on the router and the heat tape. I label the breaker in pencil because the Sharpie freezes. My calendar gets blocks called wood and water. I learned to pull water at 6:10 a.m. because the pump handle sticks after 8. Town jokes are warm. How's our lower 48 tourist? Someone asks at the Mercantile when I buy a cinnamon roll the size of a discus. They mean well. Back home, the laughter is a weapon. Brian tags me under a roommate needed, no drama, Craigslist screenshot with Jake. Katie replies with a crying laugh emoji. Mom hearts it. Birthday, no text. Christmas, red receipts on a photo I send of 2 mugs and a paper snowflake I cut out of a fuel receipt. No words back. On New Year's, Brian posts a video, a toast to our boy in exile. I turn off sound and keep splitting kindling by headlamp. One afternoon, Katie texts, "Can you grab Mom's meds?" I answer, "I'm in Alaska." She sends a gif of someone blinking. "I thought you were joking." About what exactly? Geography? My life? I put the phone down and sand the edge of a 2x12 to turn it into a bench. At 5:32 p.m., I wipe the dust with a t-shirt and feel the grain under my palm. No one can laugh that out of existence. Take a roommate, Brian suggests on speaker one Sunday, because apparently I own an apartment in their imagination. Sublet the igloo. I say, it's not a rental. It's not a joke. He sucks his teeth. Lighten up. I read him the numbers instead. Fuel delivery $409.61. Property tax $684 due June 15th. Starlink $120. Generator maintenance $38 in plugs and oil. He calls me financially controlling toward myself. That one makes me laugh for real. Decision Flip Winter Edition. No more explaining. I remove them from my streaming accounts. Authorized users aren't co-owners. I block Brian's tags. I set my Garmin in reach to auto-send a location ping to my buddy Nolan at 9 p.m. nightly, not to family. I schedule an automatic oil delivery with Northern Fuels and put a note, gate lock code 1964. I go to the post office, sign PS Form 1583 with my passport, and make the P.O. box official. I buy a used avalanche beacon because a ranger mentioned wind slabs near the ridgeline, and I like coming home alive. I build a rule for myself. Answer direct questions, ignore bait. Are you safe? Gets yes. Neighbors within snowmobile distance, medkit stocked, stove inspected on January 9th. Are you lonely? Is bait. Phrased like concern but shaped like a dare. I let it pass. When Mom texts, when is this phase over? I answer, my mortgage draft hits on the 1st. That's not a phase. Humiliation is slow. It's realizing your people believe you're a punchline, not a person. At the IGA, I buy flour and yeast and learn to bake bread in a Dutch oven with the lid inverted to hold coals. I time the preheat, 32 minutes to hit good spring. I post a photo because the loaf looks like a planet. Strangers say recipe. Family says nothing. The generator sputters on a Friday at 11:47 p.m. I pull on boots, headlamp, parka, breathe fog into the beam. I check fuel, swap plugs, tug the rope until my shoulder aches, then let the quiet win. The stars are arrogant with how bright they are. I bring my phone up and watch it think about a bar. I type, "Good night," to no one, backspace, and put it in my pocket. Saturday, I take the Husqvarna 450 to the frozen lot behind the cabin and practice bore cuts on a birch I bucked in November. I sharpen chain 10 strokes each tooth, set depth gauges with the little orange tool the marketplace guy threw in. I wear chaps that make me look like a misplaced cowboy. A neighbor on a Ski-Doo slows, flips his visor, and says, "You're getting it." I nod. That one sentence adds 10 degrees to the air. I install a carbon monoxide detector and test it at 2:03 p.m. I circle the date on a wall calendar with a golf pencil. I tape an index card by the door that reads, "Keys, inReach, headlamp, gloves." Systems are the opposite of roommates. Mom calls again. "You can't live like this forever." I look around. A made bed, a swept floor, a full wood rack, a laptop with green tests. "I already am," I say. Then I hang up, stir the stew, and set a timer for 18 minutes so the biscuits don't burn. Exactly 10 months in, a Tuesday, 10:14 a.m., Mom calls while I'm debugging a route optimizer. "Where are you? You missed your niece's birthday again. And you've been gone a whole year." I say, "I live in Alaska. I told you 6 times. Sent the address. Said goodbye. Posted photos." She exhales like steam. "Don't exaggerate. You weren't clear." I laugh once. "Clearer would be me with a megaphone under your window." Click. Dead air and my reflection in the black phone screen. 10 minutes later, Katie. "Wait. You really moved? It's been hard here. Kids, work." I reply with screenshots. My 1/12th deed recording email. My February 1st change of address confirmation. The group chat where I dropped the P.O. box and got silence. She types, stops, types. "I thought that was a phase." I respond, "Mortgage drafts on the first aren't phases." At 1:03 p.m., Brian leaves a voice note. "Come back. The adults will talk." Adults. Like I am the child shadowing their lives with a plastic lawnmower. I delete it without pressing play twice, because I know the cadence. Jokes first, rules second, guilt third. Dan. Quiet Dan. Texts when. I type, 10 months ago. He replies, "Oh." An hour later someone drops a meme. How to not reply to Family 101. For the first time all year, the emotion is relief. Not because they noticed, but because the truth is finally outside my skull. They didn't miss me for me, they missed the convenience of me. I channel the feeling into motion. Ledger check. Taxes set aside $6,240. Fuel fund $812. Emergency $3,100. I order a new gasket kit for the stove, $28.79, and schedule a chimney sweep for 9/20, $150 cash, 11 a.m. window. I stack spruce until my back clicks like a dial and the wood rack looks like certainty. I write a note on the calendar. Stop seeking witnesses. Mom calls again at 4:22 p.m. Why didn't you tell us? I open my sent folder and start reading dates. No, why didn't you tell us? She repeats, meaning, why didn't you make it unignorable? Because I'm not a fire alarm, I say. I sent adult information in adult channels. She pivots. You're punishing us. I breathe through my nose, the therapist trick I learned from a podcast. I'm living where my name is on the deed. The chorus warms up. Aunt Linda suggests a re-entry dinner. Brian DMs, let's be rational. Katie sends a selfie of the baby with cake. Caption, you missed this. I send back a video of the wood stove at 6:07 p.m. Blue flame licking the secondary burn. Caption, you missed this. Not to be snide, just to match energy. They react with thumbs downs and a single wow. That night, Nolan snowmobiles over with a six-pack and a torque wrench because my generator mount is rattling. We pull the plate, add blue Loctite, reseat the rubber bushings. He says nothing about family. We talk about chain angles and whether the IGA is carrying the good tortillas again. When he leaves at 9:36, the quiet is friendly. Wednesday, HR for a client pings me. Complaint filed. Vendor unresponsive on weekends. I reply with ticket history and SLA language. Cleared in 6 minutes. Paper beats narrative. I print the confirmation and slide it into a cheap folder labeled receipts because seeing vindication on paper trains my nervous system. Thursday, Mom tries a new angle. Your sister is overwhelmed. She needs you. I send $120 for formula and say, tell me the brand next time. Katie replies with a heart and, 10 minutes later, a reel making fun of men who run away to cabins to avoid responsibility. I mute her for 30 days and set a calendar reminder to reevaluate. I build a boundary sign no one can misread. A short email to the whole family with bullet points, address, winter access, emergency contact, Nolan. Dates I plan to be in the lower 48, none scheduled. The sentence, I am not available for last-minute errands or tag-ins. Please plan accordingly. I end with, love to the kids. I hit send at 8:02 a.m., then put the phone in a drawer and go outside to shovel the deck. When I check at noon, 2 unsubscribes by silence, 1 reply from Dan. Got it. That one lands like sunlight. At 7:20 p.m., I hike to the ridge. The inReach pings green. The valley sounds like a held breath. I think about how long I begged to be seen from 10 feet away while a whole horizon was available from here. I send myself a message I can't ignore. Stay the course. I descend, light the lamp, tally the day. Would split, code shipped, boundary sent. The phone buzzes once more. Mom. Families talk. I type, agreed. When listening is also happening. Then I set do not disturb, lay the wrench back in the drawer in its exact place, and let the stove do what stoves do. Turn fuel into heat with no commentary at all. Next morning, 6:41 a.m. A wall of text from Katie. You made Mom cry. We're busy. Stop being dramatic. Families pull together. You're punishing us. I watch my coffee bloom in the pour-over and let the steam annotate her paragraphs. When the kettle settles, I answer with a ledger. Date sent, P.O. box, deed recording, the goodbye stop by where Mom added milk to a list, the screenshot of my ridge posts, the voicemail from Brian I never finished. I end with one line. Information given is not equal to received. Then I mute the thread for a year and block her main number, not from spite, from self-preservation. The silence feels like a cleared path after a snow throw. 2 days later, Tom calls. We have priorities. Kids, work, bills. Your mom worries. The word priorities hits harder than January wind across an open cut. I put the phone on speaker, lay out my socket set and ask for actions, not apologies. A short weekly call, questions about my life first. Not errands. Review what I already said before asking again. He breathes, then says something rare. You're right. We should have listened. You matter. The words are ordinary. The placement is new. Tiny signals appear like chickadees after a storm. Friday, 4:03 p.m. Mom. Thinking of you. No requests, no emojis, just a sentence that stands up on its own. Sunday, Tom calls for 15 minutes. He asks what a chimney sweep does, then listens while I explain creosote and brushes and why I set an 11 a.m. window because the roof crust softens after sun. He repeats back the parts that matter. I notice my jaw unclench. Dan starts sending dumb memes again, raccoons stealing pizza, a guy falling off a dock. But now as a weigh-in, I reply with a video of the stove's secondary burn and he writes science, which is somehow perfect. Brian goes quiet. Then, late one night, he drops a single line. I was a jerk. I type, delete, type. We can start over if jokes aren't the first language. He reacts with a check mark. Katie comes back on a new number. I went too far. Sorry. I read it 3 times, looking for hooks. There aren't any. I write, boundaries stay. Relationship can resume. She asks what that means. I send a bullet list. No tagging me in public to mock private decisions. Confirm info before assigning errands. Ask, don't assume. She replies, got it. I don't forgive on command. I agree to try. The cabin approves this new policy the way cabins do, by rewarding consistency. I set a weekly family slot on my calendar, 20 minutes, Sunday, after I sweep ash and before I prep dough. I buy a $9 kitchen timer so calls don't sprawl into ambushes. I keep notes in a pocket notebook, who asked what, who heard what, so I don't retread ground to earn points I already paid for. Warmth is proved by repetition. Work sends a curveball. A feature frees ahead of a municipal demo. I ship my module, log tests, and take a walk at 3:17 p.m. The air is a dry textbook page. My breath writes in margins. On the ridge, my phone finds its polite 2 bars. There's a text from Mom. What's the dish on the roof again? I reply, Starlink. It keeps me reachable, not available. She heart reacts. Progress measured in tiny instruments. I install storm windows, add weather strip to the door, and swap the generator's pull cord before it frays. Systems tame weather. Boundaries tame people. When Tom asks if I can fly back for Easter real quick, I say, flights are $742 this week. Also, real quick is not a plan. He laughs, then corrects, okay, what would it take? I list 2 weeks' notice, a purpose besides optics, and a return date set before purchase. He says, fair. On a Tuesday, I get a picture. Mom's fridge, my ridge photo held by a magnet shaped like a salmon. No caption. I stand in the doorway and look at my own wall where I've taped a grocery receipt with a perfect snowflake pattern cut during a power outage. 2 fridges, 2 lives, 1 small bridge. Katie's next message is practical. What boots should I get for Liam? He wants to play in slush. I recommend a cheap pair with removable liners and say to pull the insoles to dry. She sends a photo of him stomping, tongue out. The apology has entered evidence. I keep my guardrails. I keep my life. I leave the phone on the shelf while I need, and the dough rises exactly when the timer says. I open the flue, set a log, and let the stove perform its one trick again. Turn boundaries, fuel I placed with intention, into steady heat. In October, Mom texted, show us your world? Not an order, not a trap, 5 words with a question mark like it had to ask permission to exist. I said yes with logistics. Fly into Anchorage, rent a Subaru with real tires, bring layers, stay in town because the cabin has 1 bed and 1 cranky stove. They insisted on a hotel by the water. I booked a diner in Spenard for dinner, the one with the pie carousel and a waitress who calls everyone Han without irony. Safety rails, then yes. Dinner stayed in the lanes. Tom asked about moose. Mom asked about the dish on the roof. I said Starlink again, and she nodded like it finally stuck. I mentioned a bump to senior dev, title change, same pay for now but leverage later, and a $1,000 microgrant I wrangled for a volunteer trail crew that maps blowdowns after storms. We're proud of you, Tom said. And this time it landed like a level-on wood, bubble-centered. No jokes, no detours through my supposed phase. Next morning I drove them north. I had the cooler packed. Thermos, foil-wrapped breakfast burritos, clementines. The road past Wasilla put on its wide sky coat. The mountains were leaning in. At mile 11 I turned onto my spur. The spruce were frosted like cake the town forgot. I parked, killed the engine, and let the quiet work. It's quiet, Mom said, whisper voice in broad daylight. Yes, I said. That's the point. Inside, I gave the tour like a docent of one exhibit. Stacked firewood, the ledger with columns, the pocket notebook where I track stove temps, the shelf of paperbacks, the Stanley kettle with a dent the shape of a grapefruit. Ridge photos lined the loft rail, each with a date and a temperature penciled at the bottom. I showed them the carbon monoxide detector and the little red can for embers, not for panic, procedures as hospitality. Tom ran a finger along the workbench and didn't find dust. Mom sat on the futon like touching down. She looked at the window that frames the notch between 2 peaks. We missed so much, she said. And it wasn't defensive. It was inventory. Yes, I said. No flourish. Will you forgive us? She asked. I didn't do the Hollywood pause. I'm working on it, I said, because that's the only honest tense available to humans who were children together once. We hiked the short ridge where my phone catches two bars like minnows. I pointed to the valley's fold and named the neighbors you can't see. The guy with the ski-doo who says, "You're getting it." The retired teacher who bakes bread like a roomer. Nolan who understands Loctite. We ate tacos from a truck at the highway pullout. 2 carnitas, 1 ling cod. Leaning on the tailgate with napkins going rogue in the wind. Tom didn't try to fix anything. Mom just looked and ate and asked the kind of questions that start with how. On the drive back, miles rolled under us like tape measure. They didn't fill the quiet with assessment. They asked about the bench I built and whether I'd add a second shelf. I said yes, oak if I can find it cheap. Mom said she kept my ridge photo on the fridge and tapped her phone to show me. I laughed at the salmon magnet. She tucked her hand under my forearm at a light like a reflex she forgot she had. Back in Anchorage, we found soup in a place with steam on the windows. The goodbye hug in the hotel lobby wasn't performance. It was weight and bones and the smell of my mom's shampoo from 1999. Thank you for the best weekend in years, said the note in the package that arrived a week later, wrapped in brown paper under duct tape. Inside was a framed photo Nolan took of us on the ridge, 3 dots in a big room. I put it on the shelf next to the Stanley. December, I flew home for Christmas, not because I should, not to prove anything, but to test the new format in the old house. I sent my flight info 2 weeks early, gave exact dates, wrote no errands, and booked my own rental. The living room had the same couch and the same dent where I used to land after late shifts. The difference was talk. No belittling. No igloo. Tom asked about my generator mounts. Mom asked what biscuits need to rise right. We watched a bowl game and spoke in complete thoughts with a kitchen timer running in my head and, for once, not needed. Small steps outran big speeches. When Brian started a joke, he stopped himself at word 2 and said, "Sorry. Habit." I said, "Thank you," and meant it. Katie asked for boot advice again and sent me a picture before buying. Dan, quietly Dan, handed me a mug like a peace treaty. I slept. I ate. I drove back to the airport in a morning rain that sounded like typing on the windshield. Back at the cabin, I hung my parka, lit the stove, and felt the heat meet me halfway. Another year clicked into the ledger. I kept paying the note, added a mudroom with a frostproof light and a boot rack that finally ended the thaw puddles by the door. I learned to flash a window without cursing. I posted fewer photos, routine needs no applause. I filed for a short-term rental permit after reading the borough code twice and highlighting the parts about septic and parking. Permit approved on April 11th, inspection at 10:30 a.m. The ranger complimented the ash bucket and the carbon monoxide placement. I printed the green sticker and stuck it to the inside of the mudroom door like a passport stamp no one sees but me. In May, an email with a Seattle signature line. Assistant production manager for a wildlife documentary needed a base near Denali for summer. They'd rotate camera crews, wanted quiet and a dependable stove, needed parking for 2 4-runners and a covered spot for cases. I read the insurance rider twice, then said yes with conditions. We inked peak season for $26,500 plus a $3,000 damage deposit and their policy naming me as additional insured. I wrote house rules like code. No candles, full ash can to the steel bin only, no drones over neighbors, quiet hours are real hours, call me before you invent a fix. They wired 40% up front. I opened a sub-account called Roof and Stove 2027. I spent June polishing the systems. Labeled breaker, spare gaskets in a Ziploc, photos of every wall in a folder called Pre-Crew. I put together a laminated binder. Maps, fuel suppliers, the phone number of the guy who plows when it dumps sideways at 3 a.m. I replaced the finicky backstep that the seller warned me about and added a rubber mat so camera cases wouldn't skate. On handoff day, people stepped out in puffy vests, looked around, and lowered their shoulders like the quiet impressed its own gravity. One said, "This feels trusted." That line earned a fresh line in the ledger under friction. Reversed. The cabin became a character in their workflow. They texted pictures of dawn on the ridge, a moose threading the willows, a pair of hands warming above the drum stove after a night shoot. I stayed a polite distance away, answered questions in sentences, kept tools in the truck so I wouldn't hover. When they wrapped in August, we walked the checklist. The damage report was a scuff on the bench and one bent spoon. We laughed, swapped the spoon, shook hands. The account labeled roof and stove looked like patience monetized. September, the premiere hit a streamer. I queued it with stew and a fresh loaf. In the credits, there it was between animal handler and grip truck. My name, location owner, Talkeetna. I didn't cheer. I smiled like you smile when a socket finally seats. 10 minutes later, the old chat lit up. Whoa, that's your cabin? Dude, famous. And Brian, got space for roommates? I typed no full stop. No emoji, no speech. Boundaries age well. Sundays, Mom calls on the dot. She asks what the alder does in wind and whether I found that oak shelf. Tom sends an article on caribou migration and underlines the parts that match what I told him in the truck. Dan texts, "When's grailing decent?" And, shock of shocks, actually shows up with a backpack, listens, washes his mug, and sleeps on the futon without a single errand pointed at me. Katie keeps it short and on point. Kid boots, flight seats, a thank you when I answer. The group chat still throws memes like confetti, but the ones about me got retired without a speech. I didn't ask for public apologies. I didn't design a tribunal or script remorse. I built a mudroom, filed permits, enforced quiet hours, and learned the right touch on a cold start flu. I said less, did more, and let time carry receipts. When payment hit on the last day of peak season, I moved 30% to taxes, split the remainder between emergency and silliness, which is what I call the fund for anything that delights without needing to justify itself. The first purchase was a second skillet. They laughed when I bought the cabin. I posted snow and silence, paid the note, returned to the stove when the fire asked, and answered bait with policy. 2 winters later, a film crew knocked, signed, left without drama, and rolled credits that spelled my name without anyone correcting the pronunciation. The same week, the same people who once tagged me under roommate needed, must like moldy basements asked if I still needed roommates. I don't. The cabin is full. Of systems that work, of names that mean something when they call, of quiet that no longer has to prove itself by volume. Mom still keeps my ridge picture on her fridge. I keep the framed photo of us on my shelf, beside the dented Stanley and the binder labeled house. The ledger's last line for the year reads like a thesis. Silence leveraged, boundaries held, heat steady.